Hello and welcome to the ICT Pulse podcast. I'm Michelle Marius, your host and the editor and publisher of ICT Pulse, the online platform where we discuss ICT issues from a Caribbean perspective. Welcome to our August 2019 community chat. Joining me today are Kimberly Adams, and Kimberly is the Chief Marketing Officer at Novelty Curve Inc, a Barbados-based blockchain consultancy and management company, and she's also the co-founder and director of Vision 360, a company that specializes in the creation of 3D virtual tours, architectural visualization, and virtual staging, which is also based in Barbados. And we also have Stephen Lee, who is the Chief Executive Officer of ArkiTechs Inc, a US-based technology services firm, which also has an office in Trinidad and Tobago. Stephen is also one of the founding members of the Caribbean Network Operators Group, CaribNOC, a community of network operators dedicated to sharing technical information and experiences related to the management of ICT infrastructure in the Caribbean region. Kimberly and Stephen, welcome.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having me. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Michelle. Hi, Kimberly. Thanks for having us.
Okay, so in this community chat, we'll be discussing two topics. First, the lack of opportunities for the Caribbean tech business community, which Kimberly submitted for discussion. And thereafter, Stephen wants us to discuss the challenges facing the Caribbean region's telecoms and ICT networks as they continue to evolve. So Kimberly, you're up first, and the topic you would like to discuss is the lack of opportunities for the Caribbean tech business communities. However, Kimberly, it seems somewhat controversial, since based on what everyone has been saying, the Caribbean region and the Caribbean tech space in particular is awash with opportunities. There is considerable scope for innovation to solve several of the problems that we in the region have been having, though admittedly access to finance is still a challenge. But opportunities or the lack thereof, really, from what everybody is saying, is not a problem here in the Caribbean. So what are your thoughts?
Well, Michelle, so I've been doing some research within the Caribbean region, specifically Barbados and Guyana, and I found that students coming out of the universities, they come out and then they have to settle for jobs such as admin jobs, secretary jobs, because they're not able to find that job to, really use all the skills they've been taught. And so you have this whole ecosystem, and then there's this missing element to the ecosystem. There's the educational leg, and then what comes after? You have people creating amazing ideas, but then they have no way to implement it because they don't have access to the network to further that idea, or have access to the funding to continue that idea. So you're left with a bunch of smart, creative, innovative individuals that aren't able to create because they lack those opportunities. And when I say opportunities, I mean job opportunities, internship opportunities. While there are some available, they are available to maybe like the 1% of the community, or the who knows who of the community. It's not, most of them aren't as public as they should be. And we definitely need to encourage more of this, and we need to make this more accessible to the wider tech community instead of just who knows who.
Okay. All right. Before I jump in with my question, Stephen, you have any thoughts?
Yes. Just to I guess shine some light on what Kimberly said there. I'm also seeing some of the same dynamics or the same challenges, especially in the era of smaller businesses or that entrepreneurial space. So a few years maybe removed from leaving school, somebody might easily find persons in the tech industry might have realized that they have some level of skill and can actually create products or put products and services out into the market. But to grow beyond that immediate initial space where you're serving the immediate community around you, and to build that into a more viable business does require financing, does require opportunity to pitch the business at a high level. And that can be challenging a lot of times just because of, for the same reasons, how money is spent, the developmental goals of larger enterprises or governments and so on can pose some challenges to persons who are coming in at the ground floor. There are some ways that I see us being able to get around some of that, though, which I hope we can explore some more inside of the discussion.
Okay. And Kimberly, at least from my initial starting point, I wanted to touch on, you mentioned internships, and I'm thinking though that to some degree we don't in the region have a culture of internships, and with many of our businesses being predominantly small and micro businesses, I wonder, whether or not, sadly, it's almost like a big ask when you ask businesses to take people on board. Sometimes what you may find is that when they do, the student or the recent graduate probably basically just doing filing. There's no, they're really not getting exposed to the areas that they're studying or they have studied. And then you also just have the fact that, and whether or not it may be, again, a cultural thing for us where, unlike maybe in developed countries where people are prepared to work for free to get certain experience, so basically unpaid internships, I don't know whether or not it would be the same here in the region.
Yeah, so here's the thing. There's been a lot of NGOs popping up and funding being pushed into educational programs, which, I'm all for. It's an important element for all of this. But what if we took that money and then pumped it into the organizations that can help create the internships? That alone is an avenue to kind of shift the culture a bit for internships and make this more of a norm for us, and give these students real hands-on opportunity instead of, as you said, just filing. I mean, it's definitely hard to trust newcomers to your organization, but with proper training and proper funding, this can all be done.
Okay, so going now back to what Stephen was saying, because I guess he was, at least from what I understood, he at least certainly endorsed what you were saying in terms of the lack of access to funding. And I guess what are your thoughts where that is concerned?
Right. So as it relates to funding, as I was mentioning, there is quite a lot of NGOs and organizations pumping money into educational programs, and there's an absolute need for that. I agree with that 100%. But we also have our governmental organizations that can help with this. Rather than spending money and building something that works well, let us pump that money into getting the funding necessary to progress these ideas and progress these innovations, because we might be missing out on a lot of great opportunities because the individuals who can build them, they don't have the right resources and the right funding to push it forward.
If I could just build on top of that, Michelle, I think a key part of it, and the funding is a part of the same consideration of where we're investing inside of the region. A lot of the issues that Kimberly is raising come down to where are we investing that developmental focus energy. It's possible we're going to spend money or we're going to put effort somewhere. And in many cases, I think it has become easy and somewhat reflexive of us inside of the region to put that energy, put the focus, put the money, the budgetary spending and so on towards the places that are obviously going to give a good product, a good result out the gate. Just as consumers, we can see the places in which we would get good software or good engineering services, good consulting services, and so on. And that's undeniable. It's undeniable that there are we can source a lot of these products and services outside of the region. That's fine. But instead of having a net export of funds outside of the region, we can start to redirect the funding as well as the time spent, the investment, whether that is towards people who are coming out of school or towards businesses which are starting up and so on, and give them the opportunity to provide the same services. It won't be at the same level initially as we could source outside, but I believe over a long period of time, the investment back into our own people, into our own resource bases and so on, over time will yield the kind of service levels and products and services that we want to see. So I see this as more as a long-term national and regional development concern, that we start to funnel a lot more of the energy, not giving so much lip service, but actually be willing to take the hard road with the intern and the young developer and the rough product that's going to take a while to get where we really want it, and forego the immediate benefit of investing the cash elsewhere.
I definitely agree. However, let me throw this out to you, Stephen, because one of the challenges, I think, especially in the entrepreneur and startup space, I guess, which Kimberly has been alluding to, is the lack of access to funding, for example. But we are still in the region quite risk averse, and certainly when it comes to lending monies for an untested product. So how do you think, and I certainly take on board your points about, we probably need to be looking at these challenges over a longer horizon. They're not going to be something that we can fix in a day. But how might we be able to overcome our risk-averse nature in the region?
I honestly don't have an answer for that. It's I guess it's something that you basically just have to do by looking at. I guess part of ways that we can talk ourselves into it is to look at ultimately where it will lead. I really don't have any other way to do it. But to say, if I remain risk averse, if I always settle for the thing that has already been baked and given to me, then I'm removing the option of actually getting beyond where I am today. And that's probably the only calculus, well, certainly that I can think of right now. As I say, we lock ourselves into a certain paradigm and a certain set of opportunities if we don't do something different going forward.
Yeah, and to build upon what Stephen said, we can definitely look abroad and learn from what others have been doing, not necessarily imitate, but yeah, there's like something as simple as establishing more hackathons that alone give developers and innovators more opportunity to build out their idea in a public forum. So just by taking a simple idea from abroad and implementing that within the Caribbean region, we can start seeing more activity and products being built and deployed in the region.
I have a little issue with that, Kimberly, because, all right, currently we may not have the number of hackathons that we used to have before, but probably like 4, maybe 5 years ago, in my opinion, they were all the rage. And I love the idea of those activities to help to drive innovation. But then what my observation was that, okay, within this relatively short space of time, 24 hours, 36 hours, 48 hours, you had these teams building prototypes or something. There was some output that would have been rough, but probably would need some considerable energy and massaging to get it into a polished outcome. But the funding was not there. I mean, you would give maybe $1,000 or a mobile phone as a prize, but it's not enough to do, to really help the team to build this out into any sort of business. So while I appreciate the hackathon concept, at least in the region, I think we just looked at it as a competition and not necessarily as a platform upon which to leverage the innovation and to help the tech community to develop the products and services that we need here in the region, because many of the hackathons were government sponsored and supported to help to solve problems within the region.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? These hackathons aren't taken as seriously as they should. hackathons overseas, they get $100,000 funding and so on. We need to start putting more focus on taking the money, taking all the funding, and pushing it into these products, and really valuing the hackathons, because some brilliant ideas come out of these things.
Stephen?
And another obvious big value of the hackathon is really to identify the persons who can be a part of creating solutions in the future. So the hackathon, the ideas that come out of the hackathon are obviously valuable, but we're also seeing this person over here. I could go and speak to them afterwards. I can invite them to become part of something bigger than we're able to accomplish in the hackathon. So, and that's back to the investment in the human resource base that we have in front of us.
And developers, we depend on these hackathons, on these internships, on these networking opportunities to sort of grow the access that we can, that we can reach. And because we don't have these many opportunities, we try to look abroad, and this is why you find a lot of our local developers going abroad to overseas company, because we can't find the opportunities here. And you even have local developers joining overseas hackathons because they don't exist here with the reward sufficient enough.
Understood. Just one other point. I think we need to probably begin to transition to Stephen's topic. But one more thing I wanted to touch on, which you raised, which was about networking and perhaps being only able to, maybe only the 1% who have the connections being able to leverage those and to, advance their company, their business, whatever they want to do within the tech space. And I think certainly the hackathons might be a good way because it brings, so many people together. But I also wanted to raise at least the experience, at least here in Jamaica, albeit that it has ended, well, I think since last year, which was the meetups. Here in Jamaica, we had a Kingston Beta, which was created and organized by Ingrid Riley. She has moved on to greener pastures. But whether or not, and we need more meetups within various countries across the region, and hopefully even probably on a regional basis as well, to help us to know who is doing what and what is going on, and to really help to create stronger networks, I think. Kimberly?
I 100% agree with that. I mean, in Barbados, Shannon Clark from Barcode has definitely been making a great effort, and we need to publicize the outcome of these meetups, because some of these meetups last for 10 hours plus, because when you put developers and innovators in a room, beautiful things really happen.
Oh my God, I was so stunned when you said 10 hours. Stephen, probably what has been your experience with meetups, if any, and how it might contribute to helping us to strengthen the tech community here in the region?
Well, not a whole lot of experience with meetups specifically, but I do understand the dynamic of those kinds of environments, and it's definitely a place in which people of like mind can kind of build on each other's sight and capabilities. Again, this is where who you can work with, and I think ultimately, just going back to the idea that we have to look towards a longer term view. I could be doing a meetup today while working on a project for an overseas company or some opportunity that came up. But in a background thread going alongside all of that is collaborating with 2 or 3 people who can build something together over time. I think the meetups and just knowing who is in the community and are really valuable to do that, and we can do it if we have a particular viewpoint on where we want to go down the road.
Understood. Okay, so let's move on to Stephen's topic, which was the challenges facing the Caribbean region's telecom and ICT networks as they continue to evolve. And I guess, Stephen, that the impetus behind this is just the fact that certainly telecommunications ICT is not static. It's continually is evolving. There are certain demands that are being made on networks and consequently our own thoughts about how these should develop to meet the challenges and the opportunities of I want to say the 21st century, but I'm not even sure if that is appropriate, but just how the latest trends that are occurring,
right,
as well as the imperatives that I guess may ultimately be imposed on us here in the region from developed countries and what is happening in the wider tech space.
Yeah, and the situation is that we're talking about here. It's essentially a double-edged sword, or well, probably that's not the best term for it, but it's the benefit is coming with a set of risks and things that we have to be really conscious about whether or not the risk is worth the reward in on a case by case basis. And what I mean is simply this: we're using a lot of technology every day, every second of the day, increasingly so, and we want to do more with our phones, with internet access, with the media that we're consuming, and so on. And technology is becoming a lot more democratized. In many cases, it's becoming simpler and easier to access. But that simplicity and ease of access is within a particular paradigm. It is that simple and it is that easy because somebody is investing a whole lot into reaching the masses. And this is what we see going on with the largest companies in the world right now, who are tech companies. Your Facebook, Amazon, Twitter, Microsoft, Google, of course. All of these companies, they have invested a whole lot in driving technologies all the way to the very edge. And on one hand, it's really good for us inside of the region. It's making getting things done a lot simpler and a lot faster in many cases. But the other side of that is it comes with more things being connected in ways that we never expected them to before. Privacy issues in terms of who knows what about us. The very network nature of the world that we're in means that potentially somebody in a remote country can access data. It means that somebody in a remote system can listen in to what is being said in our homes with voice control and so on. And so we have those challenges of keeping ourselves safe, keeping sovereign control of data, keeping our networks managed as we roll out more and more technology. And it's becoming easier for things to move away and out of our control. And we're seeing less and less of when you click a button and you accept something when you're signing up for a service, we're less and less aware of what that acceptance means and the implications of it, 10 steps down the road, in terms of data being given up and access being granted and so on. That's the landscape that I'm speaking about there.
Very interesting and I mean certainly quite sobering. And I think it's these are issues that I think we in the region definitely need to grapple with more and more. Kimberly, you have any thoughts before I guess start to give my own thoughts?
No, you can go ahead. I'm listening because I'm fairly new to this topic.
Okay. All right. So Stephen, what do you think is probably the most critical issue that we probably need to be considering at this point in time?
I think the most critical issue inside of all of that probably is privacy or who is able to do what with information about us. And to go back to something that was said, I think we all would be in broad agreement that we do want to have easier access to services, and we do want more convenience. For example, when using Google Maps or Waze or applications like that, it helps a lot in navigating. But when the cost of that navigation with those apps comes with a measurable timeline of where you were and when and how you got there and so on, those are some of the things that I think we have to think about. I mean, and in some cases it's innocuous, it's not a problem. But in other cases, it does represent data that can be leveraged and used in ways that we didn't intend. And so it's really a matter of awareness and making conscious choices about the use of those technologies. And by no means, being in the tech space, and by no means advocating cutting ourselves off from technology or using less of it. But I am concerned about wise use of tech and using it in a way in which it doesn't necessarily turn us away from things that we value and things that we know inside of the region are important to us.
But that also leads to an interesting question. And you had mentioned just sovereign control in a little earlier on. And I'm wondering, because here it is that, I guess to a considerable degree, and probably I will even say from a policy maker's perspective, that you get a sense that, we're just consuming technology. The major platforms that we know and love, Facebook, Instagram, Google, and so on, they release a product or they make changes to a product, and I guess we don't give it any thought how it applies to us. And I wonder whether or not, well, certainly that to some degree, we from a policy making perspective, and from a national perspective, we haven't really given a lot of thought to the implications of technology on, as you rightfully say, on our lives, how we do things, what our values are. But do you see, I guess, based on the discussion that you're having, your involvement, for example, with Carbonog and so on, what policymakers are thinking about how technology is evolving and its impact on the region?
Yes, I definitely would say that policymakers are thinking about it. We go to these regional fora, whether it's regional Carbonog meetings or meetings like Canto or internet governance meetings and so on, and you can see that people really are grappling with these issues, and we would want to have a lot more say inside of the region over how our data is used and where. But we do have somewhat of a conundrum, and it links to what we were talking about earlier with where we invest our energy and our dollars and so on, in that these services that we're using did not come cheaply, and they were produced in regions that, unlike us, are less risk averse. They're willing to take a bet on something. So Microsoft got where it got to because of bets taken by those who established it, and venture capitalists who were willing to lend money and so on over years to various companies, to the point that those companies now have data centers in the US, in Europe, all over the world, and they have internet infrastructure. The fact is that those data centers and that fiber cabling and internet infrastructure and wireless networks and so on, it costs millions and millions and millions of dollars to build and to operate. It's by no means inexpensive. And so when we're able to buy some service, some tech service off Amazon for, let's say, $20 US per month for virtual machine, or Microsoft, $25 US per month for virtual machine, it's really easy inside of the Caribbean context to do that, for business to do that. But what you're buying into is something that costs billions to actually put there. And even though in the Caribbean region, the policymakers are saying, hey, we shouldn't be giving that $20 per month to Google or Microsoft or Amazon. We really don't want to. But can we match the billions that it took to actually get them there? And we realize that we can't. And so we're in this very uncomfortable place of realizing the value of the tech, realizing the value of the cloud, wanting to do more of it, wanting to have it in a way that we can have, our own legal jurisdiction over it, but realizing the huge challenge in actually building our infrastructure in the region up to a level where it is as accessible. And, inside of those discussions, we know that we are not trying to replicate Microsoft or Google or Amazon or any of those. I think everybody's clear that we're not trying to do that. But we do, there is an interest in the region of having services that we can consume in the region and kind of shape for ourselves that we can afford to, but realizing that it does take a lot of real investment to even start to approach the levels that make sense. And it's a matter of scale. In the region, we have a few million people who could potentially pay for this. Outside of the region, you have hundreds of millions who have paid for it over a long period of time. So it's a real challenge.
So I guess, Kimberly, since we recognize that we are consuming a lot of services, content from outside of the region, and trying to tie back now into our earlier discussion about opportunities and us trying to hopefully capitalize on the opportunities, one of which really is, but I think we have to fight for it, is to create services and content that we in the region want to consume. And so create it for ourselves to use by us, and maybe even depending on what the product is, it may be relevant to other developing countries and small island developing states. So I guess how might we be able to claw back some of the control, and I don't want to say necessarily the appeal, but I guess there is some of that, where we become a little bit more Caribbean-centric in terms of leveraging and trying to seek out the opportunities within the tech business community where we can do things for ourselves?
I think that building out data centers, as Stephen was speaking, in the Caribbean would be a huge challenge to us, and that just comes from like an infrastructure point of view. Do we even have the space? Do we have the funding? Do we have all the requirements to build out something as big and as powerful as the data centers abroad? But it poses a real opportunity for our tech community and for our government organizations to come together and inject funding into the research and development of this, because once we do that, we would essentially be creating a more sustainable future for our local Caribbean community. And yeah, that's just a really good opportunity to identify the key players, give them opportunities to grow, to learn, and create a sustainable future for us.
Okay, Stephen?
Sure. Well, just agreeing with Kimberly there that that we're searching for the right level of investment, that we do have to look for those opportunities that will not only give ourselves the opportunity to learn and grow and to create new enterprises, but also save the net export of foreign exchange outside of the region. So again, like Kimberly said, we're not going to try to build the same levels of data centers, for example. But when it comes to stuff like software development, which has a lower cost of starting up, building apps that can service on a global scale, doing local content services for things which we are generating content and transactions and so on within the region that we can share across the region or inside of a country without necessarily utilizing external caches of data and so on. Those are some of the things that we can do, which don't require as much significant investment, but do require policy decisions and a different view of the world.
Yeah, if I can add to what Stephen was saying, blockchain technology really poses a great opportunity for us to build on top of that network. We can do so much as a Caribbean with such an accessible technology, from real estate to fintech to digital governance on a whole. And if we start looking at the opportunities that these advanced technology presents, we can also start creating more opportunities for our local community to really focus on creating a more sustainable and efficient Caribbean. Okay,
great. So just now, I think we probably need to be getting to the point where we are wrapping up. But Stephen, talk to us about privacy and what you think are some of the challenges we're having? I think we talk about it from the perspective of the fact that, the geographical boundaries have collapsed thanks to the internet.
Right.
And therefore, people can access our information from all over the world and we may not even be aware of it. But what about, let's say, something like GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations that the European Union introduced last year? And just the point that we are now required to think more strategically and more critically about privacy, not necessarily just in terms of what we think within the region, within our particular country might be acceptable. But again, because of how geographic borders have collapsed, we are looking at a global marketplace that we are required to pay particular attention to how we manage or handle data from people of other jurisdictions.
Right. And the whole move with GDPR, and I guess the wider revelations that have come out recently around how consumer data is being used, with elections and stuff like that, is clear to everyone that I think that the term is that people are the commodity nowadays in that social media or this world, globally connected world. The data about you and me is the thing that is being traded. And in a sense, we have agreed to those terms and conditions every time that we signed up for a free service. But with GDPR and a lot of the conversations around privacy, it's a movement towards saying that we should be in control of our own data. I applaud that in terms of the thinking behind it, that I do want to know what information is about me in some service provider's database. And it's reasonable for each individual to want to know that. But it's an extremely challenging space, because knowing where all of those data points are stored and being able to disappear them if the consumer requests it, that's a lot more difficult to do. And so while we want to ensure everybody has a reasonable level of privacy, we also have to account the cost of giving that privacy. And so again, inside of the region, we might be providing a service to persons who are based in Europe, and GDPR is applicable in that case. But when we don't necessarily control where that data is ultimately stored or where it's replicated, where it's not a server which is running in a server room inside of Trinidad or Jamaica, it becomes more expensive to comply with those regulations. And I see us more and more going into a world of just competing demands and priorities. There's a demand or the desire to lower the costs of operating these services, which is good, but that comes at the expense of less privacy, and so we want to counterbalance that, but it becomes expensive to meet that privacy requirement. And I don't think there's any simple solution to this, but I don't want to strike a note of doom and gloom just at all. But we are recognizing that it really, really is a complex landscape. And I think a different kind of conversation should happen inside of the Caribbean region. I think that before we kind of alluded to it, that we accept that the technology is good and we want to use it, and that's great. But we also have to have a more mature conversation about what are the risks, what are the rewards, what are we willing to put up with. If we know we definitely can't afford to build a set of infrastructure inside of the region, and we're going to leverage infrastructure outside of the region, then we should be clear on that, say that to ourselves, make our peace with it, and so on. That's really the idea there, because it is a complicated matter.
No, absolutely. As you're talking, I was thinking through just the fact that as a consumer, we want to be able to access certain services. Some of it is considered basic, like email and, having cloud storage and so on. And a lot of us are using services that do not reside in the region. So your information is being stored in various jurisdictions, which you really don't know. And then you add on to that, let's say if you have a business and you're using those services as well, because one, they're not available in your home country, or two, if they are, they're so expensive, right, or the sophistication of the service is really not what you can use relative to your business and, your own expectations. So you're buying services, ICT, telecoms services from overseas to serve your business, and your clientele maybe not necessarily just the customers locally to you, but they could be regional as well as international. And therefore there is a interesting kettle of fish,
yes,
that one must tackle and must consider, not necessarily just from the business itself, but I guess even the country, to try to look to see what are the implications therein.
Yeah, that's right. It's just the I guess the inevitable result of globalization that's created these set of conditions, and the more any business or country can operate at scale, the better it is for to remain stable and keep moving forward. But the less scale we have and the less opportunities that we give ourselves to operate together and to collaborate and operate at scale, the more vulnerable we are in that kind of a market.
Absolutely. And as much as that might sound quite pensive, I think we had to, introduce a certain dose of reality this episode. So, Stephen, thank you so much for just allowing us to sort of focus on these issues, because I think we can be so gleefully just enjoying the technology and probably even grumbling about why we can't do certain things, etc. And as individual consumers, but even as the countries and the region as a whole, we also need to grapple with the benefits and the trade-offs that we are continually making in accessing many of these global services and platforms.
Right. Thank you a lot, Michelle, for the opportunity. It was good speaking with you today.
And Kimberly, thank you so much. I mean, the whole issue of the tech opportunities and what we hope could be happening, because I think, as I said, certainly in my initial thoughts, we think that the Caribbean is so awash with opportunities, that we have so many problems to solve, and we are an innovative people, but there are some very real challenges that we are experiencing, and the tech business community specifically are experiencing, which I am so thrilled that you drew to our attention.
Thank you, Michelle, for having me.
Okay, folks, so that's it for our August 2019 community chat, and hope that you tune in to our next community chat in September, where we will be exploring 2 new issues that should be relevant to the ICT and tech community here in the region. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the ICT Pulse podcast. You can find links to some of the things we talked about on our website, ict-pulse.com. If you like this episode, please show your support by leaving us a review on iTunes, as it will help others find the show. You can email us at info@ict-pulse.com, or drop us a note on our Facebook page, facebook.com/ICTPulse, or via Twitter @ICTPulse. We hope you'll join us again for our next episode. Take care.